Namaskar and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Deba Mitra, and on behalf of Kalinga Literary Festival, I welcome you all to today's Bhava Samvad session. It is about the newly published book by HarperCollins India by the renowned author and poet Mani Rao, who will be in conversation with the academic Professor Kamalakanta Das. So I request now to both our dignitaries to kindly begin with the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Devamitra. Thank you, Kalinga Literary Festival. Thank you, Bhav Sambad, for giving us this opportunity and creating this platform to discuss very important translation work on the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So before we come back to the discussion point with eminent author and poet Mani Rao and translator, we will be discussing a brief about what is Kalinga Literate Festival and what is Bhav Sambad and why this dialogue is really important and where it is located in the larger context of idea exchange and contribution to the cultural, ideological, and educational, economic, political aspects of human life. So, Kalinga Literary Festival, which started in the year of 2014, in last 10 years, has made its strides in Kalinga, in Bhubaneswar, in Delhi, NCR, in Kathmandu as well, and slowly is also entering into Southeast Asia with invitations from Bali and also from Colombo. So our two major destinations are going to be in 2024-25 to reach out to Bali and Colombo as well. Bhav Sambad was created as an platform, as a platform from KLF during the COVID-19 times when we couldn't meet physically. So but this was an online platform of Bhav Sambad, as the name suggests. So the emotion and the dialogue of the Bhav. So emotion may not be the right translation of bond. So this is also a very perfect time to discuss it. Mani Rao to see how translation or certain words we cannot perhaps translate well. So over to Mani Rao, who has done a brilliant work in simplifying translation. Perhaps Bhagavad Gita is the
Thank you.
most widely read book in the world about from the Sanatan philosophy and Sanatan epic, that is Mahabharata, and the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna as the charioteer and Arjuna as the warrior. The picture is most probably very, very famous around the world. And whether it is scientist Oppenheimer or Einstein, many people have either seen, approached, or have actually used one couplet or one verse in one place or the other. So whether it is Mahatma Gandhi or Bal Gangadhar Tilak or Yogi Aurobindo or Swami Vivekananda from that time to this time, or even ancient times, Adi Shankara, to several of them who have written commentaries on this text. And this is also considered one of the key texts on the Prasthana Trayi, where you want to become Jagat Guru has to at least make a commentary on Bhagavad Gita. So, on the path of being a Jagat Guru, Mani Rao, welcome to you and to and you have done one translation commentary now. So we can expect on Upanishads later onwards and Brahma Sutra later onwards. So with Bhagavad Gita, it's a fantastic translation. Over to Mani Rao. Why the question? Please take us through why Bhagavad Gita. What made you to write on this? Earlier, you have also attempted your work on Bhagavad Gita. And I understand there are two types of people in the world who look at Bhagavad Gita very, very closely. One type of people are the sadhakas, are the sannyasis, are the renunciate people who come in the category of Rishi, Sannyasi, Adi Shankara, Madhvacharya, or Sri Chaitanya. So these are people who are ascetics, who are sadhakas, and other kind of people like Mahatma Gandhi, like Patel, or like Gokhale, or people like in the political like Tilakji, and then people like them who have attempted to understand Bhagavad Gita from staying in their position of political leadership. So I look at this as a sadhakas and also social reformers, if I can put it this way. So they have tried to look at Bhagavad Gita in their own way. So where is Mani Rao and why Bhagavad Gita and what is the takeaway from this book? Over to you. Hearty welcome to Bhava Samvad. Over to you.
Thank you so much for taking the time and interest and reading so much about all the various conversations we had over yesterday through files, exchanges, and so on to get a grasp on this book. Thank you. I see two questions in what you're asking. First, you asked why I translated it, and then you seem to be looking for what's my positioning with reference to like the historical trend of the kind of people who have engaged with the work. Why I translated it was actually, it came about in an accidental manner. I had actually not read the entire Gita until I was in my 40s. Um, I remember yesterday you were telling me how when you were 4 years old, you would go to some functions where, you were listening to the Gita and you had memorized it. That is pretty much the situation for a lot of people. Because, what you talked about, that picture of the Gita Upadesha picture, Krishna and Arjuna in the chariot in the middle of the armies in no man's land, that is so ubiquitous. It is so ubiquitous that people think they already know it because they know 4 or 5 shlokas from the Gita, which they repeatedly hear, the popular ones, the top ones, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir that one, and karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. They know all the top points, that, okay, Atman is eternal, indestructible, finished, complete, message is complete. So they don't actually bother to read the entire Gita. And I also did not. I actually only read the entire Gita. I think I may have been 39 or 38, like, sort of getting really interested in heritage texts and sources. And it came about as a translation exercise initially, as in I was supposed to do a textual analysis of a handful of translations of a source text. And the Gita had become a topic for that exercise in a translation theory class. And when I looked at it and then I started reading the Gita, it actually fell right into my own sadhana as well. Because I would say sometime in 2004, when I turned aside from my career to focus on studying and sadhana, the Gita was not actually really on my so to say, list, because I thought I was familiar with it. When I read the Gita, my response was partly as a poet. I really was very struck by how delightful it was. All the word pairings, all the, how beautifully the expressions come up, the persuasiveness, the little bit of drama, little touch of humor, all of these things which I had not expected in it. I was very struck by the delights of the Gita itself. Also by the simplicity, the fact that it feels like a spoken word. The experience of reading the Gita actually was quite different from how I had been led to expect it to be. By that, what I mean is that the Gita is so couched in a framework of piety. It is so couched in a framework of piety, it is almost treated like a SFX. If somebody passes away, Gita pado, or read one shloka a day and sort of do dhyan about it. But you actually can't read one shloka a day. You have to read a number of shlokas to understand what that set of shlokas is saying. Even in the commentaries and in all the spiritual leader sessions, you turn on a TV channel or some guru is talking, or you go for, they will give you 10 days of bhashya on like one chapter. Or if one year it will be karma yoga, another year it will be jnana yoga, So it is all divided into parts and created like a big syllabus, right? And so when you approach it like that, you don't actually get a feel for it. Even the singing, look at how it is sung, Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta. It's very monotonous, and all the 700 shlokas are done in that manner, you know.
Though
But
Yasudas ji has rendered his voice, and that's a different one. Yeah.
yeah, but actually, it is actually very dramatic. It is Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yutsava mamakaha pandavaschaiva kimakurvata Sanjaya. You know, there's a lot of bhav in it, there's a lot of expression in it, right? And when you read the entire Gita from the beginning to the end, you get a different understanding of its message. You're not sort of waiting to pounce on some point or the other that you want to create and make politically and sort of make a little campaign about this is a good text or this is a bad text. You know, you have a different approach to it. So my experience of the Gita was based on a complete reading of the Gita. It was fresh. It was when I was already an adult, you know. So I was coming into it with a particular kind of poetic sensibility. And when I saw that the translations were complicating it, I was really inspired and driven to get to know the text more and to really study it. And what better way than to know a text than to translate it? When you translate something, you are really thinking about every little nuance, you know? And so that, I don't know why, it just became an obsession, and that became a bigger and bigger and bigger project, which involved research and reading other translations, reading different bhashyas, trying to understand everything. And alongside that was like the Anuvad going on, which was in a poetic format. Um, and so that was why I translated it. And of course, I'm aware that there are hundreds of translations right from the beginning, where in you know, from Wilson's time onwards, everybody who comes to read the Gita wants to translate it. And so what? Good. It means that here is a source text that can actually hold all of those voices. You know, it can hold all of those voices. It's got a magnetism and a charisma. It attracts everybody. It poses a lot of questions. It invites argument. It invites engagement. It invites reflection, and it invites any thinking person into it. So when you study the Gita, if you're an author, the chances are very high that you'll want to write about it. If you really study and like just dive into it, the chances are very high that you will write about it as well. And for me, as a poet and a translator, that's what I did. I translated it as a poem. So
Right.
then your question about, you know, where do I see myself standing? Of course, I see myself as a sadhaka, as a student, as a learner, as somebody interested in spiritual progress, and as you know, trying to learn more about I would say the manifestation of whatever it is out there, and our place in it. Um, I think that the gurus of the earlier centuries are actually teachers, and academics are also teachers. And so there are big teachers, there are small teachers, and every teacher has a use. You know, if mom is away, your 7-year-old child is good enough to look after your 2-year-old child. I don't think there is such a thing as like a padavi or a socially conferred title that entitles you to engage with something. That kind of adhikar, I think your question is actually about adhikar. That adhikar comes from within. And if you don't have it, then you cannot do it. Also, you know, maybe I'm rambling, but actually I'm not, because your question is about adhikar. And what I would draw your attention to is, you know, in the word adhikar, which we consider as right, who's got the right to speak on something or to engage with something? Actually, adhikru, somebody who does more. by taking greater responsibility, you get greater rights. The two are intimately linked, you know. So it is your duty, it is your responsibility, and that gives you your right. The two go hand in hand. So if you want to translate the Gita, you're going to have to do a lot of work. It's not something you're just writing in one afternoon. You're choosing to make it a part of your life. You're diving right into it. You're doing a lot, you know, and that is what gives you the adhikar.
Okay, so let's come back to the question of adhikar. Like Krishna says, like karmanye badhikar asti. So that means you have the right on to do your work or duty. Ma phaleshu kadachana. So did Manirao think about anything that this book is going to be a foundational text at one level, maybe revolutionary text at another level, maybe inspiring at another level, and maybe some people would be reaching out to you and saying, Mani, we would like to translate your book into other Indian languages. So, but this is something very interesting because what I have found in my preliminary first-hand reading is this, that the translation is easy to understand, and written from a perspective of a sadhaka who understands the language without, or understands Sanskrit without compromising on the essence of the text. It has given you a simple English translation where people in schools, like those who study in English medium schools, may not have access to the Sanskrit language or may not have interest at all as well. So this book can be something like a gateway for them into the Bhagavad Gita. So that is where I see that karmanya badhikar istama phalesu kadachana, but your fruits are coming out as if something you have may not have thought about it. This is something perhaps the first women-centric representation, I dare call it feminist version of Gita, where the pronoun is she. And see, there are fantastic things are coming out from here. One is a simple translation. Second is pronoun is she, and third, it is actually talking without the compromising the essence of the text. It brings out the best possible translation it could have done. So this is this targeted towards Gen Z or 21st century learners who may have lower attention span? Over to you.
Thank you again. Three different points here. First, you've talked about karmanya vadhikaraste. Actually, when I translated it, I translated the entire Gita, and I had no idea about publication. There was no proposal that went out to any publisher with here's a sample of 6 pages, or here's a proposal, or here's a methodology. I actually translated the entire Gita, and it was my own personal project because it was part of my own sadhana. And it took over a year to do. And that involved study, it involved, immersion, etc. After that, when a journal, Exchanges, published an excerpt, this is because I had come across somebody who got interested in what I was doing and published an excerpt in Exchanges. I sent a link of that to a friend, and then after that it landed in Penguin India's door. The manuscript was already ready, So in 2010 and 2011, when it actually came into a book, the phala of the karma, the translation had been done in 2008. And then after that, every few years, a new edition comes out with, maybe now this edition actually has a longer introduction. It actually talks about my thoughts on how to decode the commentary, how to decode the interpretations, what is probably the best methodology in my view for approaching the Gita. It sort of is like there's a very long introduction that will be helpful to people who want to know how to start, how to enter this subject and topic. The second point you were talking about was simplicity. See, the thing is that unless the message is simple, Arjuna is not going to understand it. Krishna's message has to be understood by Arjuna. If it's not understood, it's not going to be successful. The Sanskrit is actually simple. It's not complicated. The Gita is not complicated. The Gita is simple. It's practicing it that's complicated. It's practicing, it's putting it into practice. I mean, to actually live that line, karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. That is, a life's work. That is a life's work. How do we do things without an agenda? How do we do things by really understanding, harmoniously fitting into the flow of it? How do we know what to do, what is the right action, and not sort of keep blustering over what it might achieve or not achieve? That is a lifelong complexity. But the verse itself is very simple, and a lot of the commentaries and the translations, they do complicate it. I'm so sorry to say, they do complicate it, because they think that it is a profound text. Therefore, the more pedantic they are, the more profound it will appear. But simplicity is actually more profound. When that shloka that you quoted before, yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata, that is very simple. Basically, what was my translation in that? 4.7. Arjuna, when the correct fades, incorrect rises, I procreate myself. That's it. That's actually all that it says. There is no need for more words in that. So it looks like it's simple. But this is not simplicity that needs to be mapped onto, let us say, school students or people who don't have a great a lexicon at their command, etc. The simplicity comes from the source text, and that is profound.
I have an interesting.
You talked about the she aspect as well, but maybe we can take that as another question. But you're about to say something. Go ahead.
I was saying something. I have an interesting anecdote. I think we heard you might have heard Swami Nigamananda, who was a Bengali sadhaka from Bengal. When he writes his three of this book, like Jnani Guru and Tantrika Guru and Premika Guru, he writes three books, which I read in Odia.
Okay.
So he says that he spirit curled a person where the person is apologizing of mistranslating a word in Bhagavad Gita. That word is like the same sloka 4.8, Paritrana yasadhunam vinasaya daskritam dharma sastha panarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So he says, he was also a sadhaka who wrote it, that why dharma sasthapana? It is not sasthapana, it is dharma sangrakshana. Dharma sangrakshana. So he does it rewrite in translation and says that it should be dharma sangrakshana, not dharma sastapana. Maybe Vyasadeva was not right. So in whatever way. And then Nigamananda says, then in his writing, so that when I was doing my sadhana, on a dream night, I found someone's call that Mr. Nigama, hey Acharya, can you do me a favor? That I wrote a wrong translation, or I inserted dharma sangrakshanaarthaya, not sasthapanarthaya. But whatever Vyasadeva wrote is right. So I heard this, I read about it maybe 30, 40 years back. I remember this mistranslation or a meaning lost in translation. So dharma sasthapana, dharma sangrakshana. That thing I wanted to bring in, that's just an anecdote. Second thing, in Odia language, our fathers and parents and everyone used to tell that in Odia, I will say and translate that as well. Buju, nobuju, padha, gita, ruchu, noruchu, kha, pitta. So what does it mean? Okay. बूझ न बूझू, समझ में आए या ना आए, गीता पढ़ना चाहिए. रुच न रुचु, टेस्टी लगे, आपको रुचिकर हो या ना हो, रुचिकर हो या ना हो, फिर भी आपको बिटर चीजें खानी चाहिए, because that is good for health. So नीम के पत्ते आप खा सकते हो, भले ही ये रुचिकर ना हो. भगवत गीता पढ़ना चाहिए, भले ही समझो या ना समझो. Anyway, over
See,
to you.
I would actually say that I completely disagree with this attitude and approach. This is a one of the problems I think that we have today in how Gita is presented. See, Gita is actually technically not Shruti. It is not Shruti, it is part of Smriti. It is part of the Mahabharata, right? So by extracting that whole, those 700 verses and putting it in a book and doing puja to it, and then what happens, and then not attempting to engage with it, but just reading it as if the reading is going to do something exalted to one's, I don't know, ethereal body or something. What
Mukti mil
happens?
jayega. Gita.
Huh, that is not going to,
People used to say,
yeah, that,
Gana kartam tranayati jasa Gita. So Gana
yeah. So
kartam.
I think these are problems. All these proverbial things you're saying, I think, are major problems because they are barriers. Piety is a barrier to understanding. You know, understanding comes with engagement, with an open mind, with the ability to interact with the text. And so this is very interesting in that the position that it has of Shruti today. You know, it has got the position of Shruti. Why does it have that position? Well, first of all, it has the figure of Krishna in it. And Krishna is, you know, a divine figure. And there is what is Krishna saying is he is showing his Vishwarupam to Arjuna. So there is that whole pramana kind of aspect coming in, which is that it is pratyaksha, right? You know, in Shruti, we have all the pramanas. You have pratyaksha, you have upamana, you have, you know, all the various ways of creating an evidence. What is Shabda is a pramana as well. But actually, Gita is not that. It is coming from the Mahabharata. It is part of the Itihasa. It is part of the story and the narrative. And the context is completely important in it because the problem of dharma that is sort of comes to a climactic point when the Gita dialogue happens has come from the beginning of the Mahabharata. All the dharmic issues about the kingdom, who inherits it, you know, how does Gandhari react when she finds out that Kunti has had a child, you know, all those attitudes and all the animosity, all of those dharmic questions are actually there, buried in the context, right? And so it is dharma kshetre, and so that comes pouring right into the Gita. And if you don't acknowledge all of that, and if you are simply reading the Gita as though it is a pious text that is going to uplift you even without understanding what the discussion is about, then what happens is all these misunderstandings happen. Hey, why is he telling him to fight? Does he have to kill people now? Is that something that is being advocated? And all these various questions come in because you haven't thought of it in terms of a narrative. Not only is the narrative of the Mahabharata important, there is a narrative inside the Gita also. That is why it is very important to read the entire Gita. And whenever anybody comes to me and says that I have these problems, my first question is, have you read it? Have you read the entire Gita? Not like some essay on it, or not like hearsay what somebody else has said. You know, have you read the entire Gita and actually attempted to, you know, get a hang of that context? Yeah. So I would completely disagree with that approach that the Gita should be that the Gita part idea where thousands of people gather and they're all reading the Gita. It doesn't do anything. They're not going back with a bigger halo around their head. I'm sorry.
Right. I think that point is well taken. So now coming back to your pronoun making she and
Okay, yeah.
the discussion between the Parama Shakti and the Jiva Shakti. So why you have, maybe you are the first translator who had chosen to put she as a pronoun in this context. So the warrior Arjuna, for Arjuna, you are the Arjuna in that case. So as if Krishna is talking to Mani Rao and Mani Rao has said, okay, I am going to respond in this way. So why this idea of she came and where it came from?
It was actually very simple. As I told you, I was actually doing the translation for myself, you know, and it seemed natural to have she, because Krishna is talking to me. I am in Arjuna's shoes, and I call myself a she. Um, Therefore, I turned everything from he to she. And how many texts have we read where everybody is a he? I would like to read a text where I can relate to it. You know,
Yeah.
so I did that. It was just an organic or a natural response to it. There was not like a big conference with myself where I told myself, ki, yes, I should, respond in this way. It was not. It just happened naturally, and it felt right. So I continued with it. And then when I completed the manuscript and looked at it, it still felt right. And so
Right.
there it is.
Right. How do you look at your book making a contribution to making the Bhagavad Gita popular in a way so that people can read it out, like people read maybe short stories, maybe novels, maybe there are popular names like Chetan Bhagat is very popular among young people. So there are several others who write stories of love, stories of fight, to stories of resilience, stories of success, stories of hope and failure, and all that. So though in the fiction world that students are studying or reading those things, some people are asked also, if you want to read, if you want to develop your English language skills, read these simplified English literature that people are producing. Some people call them a pop fictionist or whatever, so popular fictionist. So in that way, what is, I don't see you made a conscious effort to locate yourself anywhere, either in the translation genre or something, or in the sadhaka genre and the political genre, the social reformer genre. This is a very honest attempt that comes out very honestly from you. That is one. But in the hindsight, would you like to say or see that this book may make a contribution in the Bhagavad Gita reading circles, right? People,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
I completely agree with you. The oral aspects and the auditory aspects are very important. I think that comes from my approach as a poet to it, to paying attention to the sound of the shlokas, and to the rhythm and the flow. So I can actually read the English translation continually like a poem from the beginning to the end, in a rhythmic manner. And I think it also is easy to read, because it is written like that. It is
yeah,
written like that. Often what happens in terms of form is, you will see that some people try to create a metrical poem, right? Where they say ki yahan pe there are 4 lines, and so therefore I will write 4 lines here. And then, because line 1 says this, line 2 says this, line 3 says this, line 4 says this, so then they are constrained by all of that, and it's very hard to keep the fidelity aspect in mind as well. Like, how do you
yeah.
capture, how close to the meaning can you go? At the same time, you're not willing to move any of the parts around, so for me, what I did was, and now we're getting into translation methodology when we talk about this. Well, first of all, I talked about the simplicity, right? It is a speech, it is in the speech rhythms, right? It is spoken word. Krishna is talking to Arjuna. It's a speech. It's not a written letter that he's giving him. He's talking to him. It's a simple Sanskrit, and it's very persuasive. It's convincing, and of course, it is called the Gita. Also, it is something that can be sung. There is a pattern to it. There is a rhythm to it, right? So all of those aspects came into the translation also, that the English translation must be like that. So for example, when you say a who's who of heroes, each a Bhim and Arjun, the translation flows like a poem. And the other kind of form that people use is that they try to make it look like a poem by cutting up the translated sentences, but then they haven't paid that much attention to the rhythm. So using, I would just call it contemporary poetry, and using the space of the page helped me to do that, to capture the rhythm, to use fragments, to use longer sort of sequences, and to create like mise en scène, to create a scene or a vignette of a few different shlokas. Sometimes you have to understand the Gita in sets of shlokas. Like until you actually know the previous shloka, you don't really grasp the next one. And that leads to a lot of complexities. For example, when nasato vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate satah, everybody breaks their head over it. This is, my God, what is sat and what is asat? You can talk about it for an entire day and you wouldn't know what is sat and what is asat. But just look 2 stanzas before that, matra sparshastu kaunteya. He's talking of shitoshna sukha dukkha. He's talking of sensations. Immediately after that, he talks to sat and asat. So your connection is made by the context of the immediate shlokas that come before it and come after it. So you have to understand it in sequence, read it in a sequential order, just like you read all those novels you were talking about. It is a narrative. It is part of the narrative of the Mahabharata. So you have to read it from the beginning to the end, and it's actually not confusing. Then you don't get all these questions about, oh, which chapter is the Jnana Yoga and which chapter is the Bhakti Yoga. These are all later interpolations. I mean, surely Krishna is not saying there in the battlefield, now I will tell you chapter 4. These are editorial interventions that must have happened later. So I tend to see this as a narrative, as a simple narrative, as a persuasive narrative that contains a lot of very important, interesting, profound messages with which we can engage and see how to make it relevant and applicable to our own lives, aside from the context of the Arjuna.
Right. Very well taken. Would you like to read a few slokas that you think are very, very important, or perhaps very central part of Bhagavad Gita, very important slokas? Maybe a few of them, and with the Sanskrit and the English translation as well. Few of your chosen slokas.
Sure. Thank you for that interest. I actually want to not go for all the popular ones, but present a few different shlokas that I think actually are very important. Chapter 6 I consider very interesting. In 6.29, Krishna says, Sarvabhutasthamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. And the translation is, this is talking about the sadhak, the devotee, the seeker, the sthita prajna, the person who is in that role, sees herself in all beings in herself, self same everywhere. So samadarshana as a quality is something that is really emphasized by the Gita, and I think this is not given enough significance in conversations about the Gita, and that is why I chose this shloka, this really small, short, important 3 lines. The next one I would like to read out is 6.05. 6.5, yeah. उद्धरेदात्मनात्मानं नात्मानं अवसादयेत् आत्मैव हि आत्मनो बन्धुरात्मैव रिपुरात्मनः. Right? And this is, you've got to help yourself. I've actually combined 6.5 and 6.6 in my translation, which is the next one is Bandhuratma. This one is combined in this, so it's not like line by line. You've got to help yourself up, not put yourself down. You are your own friend. You are your own enemy. She who has self-mastery is her own friend. She who hasn't is her own enemy. So this is a very important message, again, especially to people who think about this idea of surrender, as you were talking about this before. There is a lot of emphasis about plucking yourself up. Have courage and help yourself. You are your best friend. You are your worst enemy. This is, I think, a really, really important point, that we have to find those resources within ourselves. Another shloka, a third one that I would pick is 2.38. I mean, there are so many interesting messages in the Gita that are not so um, talked about. In, everybody talks about those 5 or 6 shlokas. This one is 2.38. Sukha dukha same kritva labha labhau jaya jayo tato yuddhaya yujjasva naivam papam avapsyasi. Do the math. Happiness equals sorrow. Gain equals loss. Then take on the war. You can't lose. This, I think, is very, very crucial because it is only by rising above the dvandva, rising above the happiness and the sorrow, the gain, the victory and the defeat, the gain and the loss. It is by rising above these that we know how to deal in life, deal with
Like
life.
Krishna says, like Traigunya Visaya Veda,
Yes.
Nistrigunna Vararjuna.
Yes. So there, of course, in that shloka, it is interesting because what Krishna is talking about is mapping a whole system of gunas, right, which is the sattva, rajas, and tamas. There is a very intricate mapping, and this is something that is worthy of understanding. That there are 3 gunas. This is the universe. There are natural laws. These are the gunas, the swabhavas that go together with these gunas. So everybody is a mixture, Prakriti is a mixture of all the gunas. And where one guna dominates, certain swabhavas dominate. So then how do you get out of a certain mode of living is to cultivate a different guna. And how do you do that? So therefore there's a whole map, almost like a chart given throughout the Veda, throughout the Gita, sorry, that tells you about the gunas, the world of the Veda, which has these 3 qualities, and how do you rise above it? How do you have it in you and yet rise above it? Yeah.
Would you like to throw some light on the 2.37, where it says Hattva Prapsasi Swarga Jittava Vakyase Mahim Tasmat Utishta Kaunteya Yadhyaya Krutanishya. So the translation, your book says, if you die, you will get to heaven. If you live, you will enjoy yourself. Get up, get ready to fight.
Yes. So this is the
So,
context. This is the context of the Mahabharata.
right.
What has actually happened until then? Peace talks have failed. Arjuna is the Kshatriya. He's right there. The battle is about to start. They're right at that moment before the battle. At this point, to say that now my bow is falling down, now I'm sweaty, now my hair is like all standing up, this is cowardice. And all of the reasons that Arjuna actually gives are all to do with his orthodoxy. He says he's afraid that if he goes to fight, then the kula dharmas will not be upheld, and then striya hadushyanti, and then there will be a mixture of varnas, varna sankaraha, then the pitru karmas won't be done, and then we'll all go to hell. He's afraid of all of these, the framework, right? He's afraid of that whole framework. And what Krishna tells him is that put that aside. You're here to fight. You're here to fight. When you're already here, you've come too far. It's a point in the narrative. You don't really have a choice. You can either fight or you can quit. And if you quit, of course, you're going to be called a wimp.
Yeah,
You're a
the
warrior. You don't have a choice. You have to fight. And so, in the conventions of that time and place, if you die, you go to heaven. If you win, if you lose, these are the options basically. So this is a part of that context, and we have to understand it in that context.
So another sloka, one or two, I will come back, and then perhaps would like your reading to continue. One is that the Indian psychology that people have talked about, that Bhagavad Gita talks about, like dhyayate visayana punsa sangasya sanjayate, like so sanga sanjayate kama kamat kudha vijayate kudha bhavati sammoha sammoha smriti vanza buddhinasu buddhinasa pranashyati. So it actually gives a like a stepwise what happens when you do this.
The
What
whole
happens?
the whole process, yes, the whole process, it's just so and illuminating when you actually understand that process. Sangat sanjayate kamaha, kamat krodhaha, then smriti vibhramaha. Just one after the other, you understand the process. And when you understand the process of how you're reacting to the objects, to the world, then you become aware of it. And actually this sequence is also something that is common in Vipassana teachings also. It is not, it is not unique to this particular source text. And of
Yes.
course, let's not talk about what came first or what came next or whatever, but this is a lot of different thought schools of thought have talked about this, that as human beings, we have senses, then there's the world, and there are sensations, then we react to those senses. So then what happens is we want to repeat pleasure and we want to avoid the pain. As every time we have either pleasure or we have pain, and we repeat the pleasure and we avoid the pain. But what about the mind? You like something today, and the same thing gives you dislike tomorrow, because you
Yes.
have this figure the same, for the same reason sometimes.
Yes.
So there is a very interesting sort of system that is explained in the Gita about who is in control, which is that you are in control. It is your will that you have to use. You have to use your willpower.
Yes.
So you have your body, you have your senses, you have your mind, you have your resolution and will. On top of that, your mind is not sort of going to lead you like a crazy person day in and day out. These are very, very interesting and important thoughts that, if I would, that I'm sure as parents, all parents like their children to understand this as they're growing up, as they're, interacting with the world. And the
Right.
Gita has all of this in it, and it's really valuable as a practical guide to life in that way.
Like last question in that say same length to understand. Like Arjuna asked in 2.54, the Sita
Okay.
Pragya Sakavasa Samadhis Tasya Keshava Stita Dhikim Prabhasate Kimasat Brajet Kim. So it asks, who is Stita Pragya? So is it
Yeah.
possible to be then another thing Krishna somewhere says Stitadhi Maniruchyate. So, and your dhi, which is the intellect, when it is tira, then you can become a muni. So, in that sense, Krishna continues 2.55, 2.56, like that. Dukheshu nabiknamana, sukeshu begataspurat, vitaraga bhayakrudha, stitadhi muniruchyate. So, what is your understanding or take, or perhaps how we can make this understand to the audience that now today, that is Stita Pragya an idea that is possible, that is exist in the society, it is attainable, and what Krishna is saying, it is also something which has relevance to our actions and behaviors and relationships of today.
Absolutely, it is attainable. It is attainable. Asthita prajna is a goal as well as attainable. I don't think there is such a thing as once you attain something, then a big rocket takes off with light and sound. like like they say, like some nirvana occurs, and there's like a sound and light show and a rocket has taken off. I don't think it's like that. It is abhyasa, like when Arjuna asked Krishna, how do I do this? How do I become this? And Krishna tells him, through practice and undifference. Through practice. You practice again and again and again. That is what helps you. And through undifference is you calibrate yourself. You become aware of yourself each time you respond to something. You develop your second consciousness to observe yourself, and you sort of navigate your way in such a way that you create that samadarshana in yourself. And so sthita prajnata is absolutely possible.
Possible.
And this is a very interesting section you have pointed out, actually 2.55. I'm just going to read in the section because this is what the Gita is about, actually. Krishna, he says, the 2.55. She ignores desires, they come and go with self, is happy to simply be. In bad times, not down. In good times, not up. Passion, fear, anger gone. In everything, wants nothing. Pleasant and unpleasant alike, neither salutes nor dislikes. Can disengage sense organs from sensuous things completely as a tortoise withdraws into shell its limbs. This is a lifelong goal,
Sadhana.
isn't it? Yes.
Yes.
This, this
Okay.
is so this is so important. I'm so grateful to you for pointing attention to these aspects of the Gita, instead of the ones that usually trouble people. But of course, you're welcome to bring up those also.
Yes, yes. The question that troubles us also, like Chaturvarna Maya Srustva Guna Karma Vibhagasa. And that also troubles people, saying that if the Varna means that is the Brahmana, Vaishya, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. And then in Purusha Sukta, the Brahmana Mukhamasita Bahu Rajanyakruta Urutad Vaishyam Shudra Padyanguscha Jayate. So in the Purusha Sukta, it is written there. So and we have several references to find out also that when to find out whether there is social hierarchy which is vertical, and it is not necessarily one can become the other. So though there are several examples that Valmiki is a new example of how a rishi became, who was not from a Brahmin family. Neither Krishna is born in Brahmin family, nor is Rama is born in Brahmin family. So like that, neither Vishwamitra comes from a Brahmin family. So there are several examples in the opposition also, several examples in the for also. That, but how do we understand from Bhagavad Gita that what Krishna is saying, Chaturvarna Maya Srustva Guna Karma Vibhagasa, and what relevance it has for today's audience, the reader, to understand what really Krishna meant. And is it something talking about a hierarchy, which is watertight compartment that existed and eh, no mobility at all? Yeah, over to you.
Well, first of all, I don't think every word has to be relevant to us. I don't think every shloka has to be relevant to us. This is part of a narrative of the Mahabharata, number one. And let us look at where it comes in the narrative. What actually is going on at that point? Chaturvarnyam maya srishtya. Yeah. Guna karma vibhagashaha. Krishna is explaining a schematics. That means he has created 4 varnas, divided according to guna and karma. Guna is the qualities and karma is the actions, meaning the duties that the person has to perform.
Right.
And as we know, Varna is not caste, because Jati is caste, and there are 4 Varnas here, and there are thousands of castes, right?
Yeah.
So that mapping, let us remove that from our mind. At the same time, of course, there is a rigidity of the Varnas, and there has been also the discussion that Vrunate iti Varnaha, meaning that it is about choice or tendency, that if you have the tendency to be engaged in learning and teaching and knowledge, then that is a Brahmin's tendency. The warrior tendency is the Kshatriya, etc., etc. So these are all the various apologetics, let us say, or the explanations or the ways in which we can understand it.
Yeah.
Whether it's relevant to us, why would it be relevant to us? Look instead at all the examples of Samadarshana in the Gita, right? Look at all the examples of how a Pandit is somebody who takes joy in the welfare of all beings, who considers
Indeed.
everybody equal. There are
Yeah.
so many shlokas about that, and instead we want to go and pounce on this one shloka. But if you stop reacting so quickly, and if you simply read it in the narrative, what is the second line of that stanza?
Yeah.
Tasya kartaram apimam akartaram vidhi. He's saying, I am the doer and I am the non-doer. basically an example is being given of the creator is giving an example of I made this. He could have been talking about, I don't know, diversity. He has created four kinds of types of humanity, four kinds of whatever in creation. I don't know, clouds, trees, something. There is an example being given. Let's not get personal for a moment. Just for a moment, let's not get personal. There is an example being given. The next line says, I am the doer, but it doesn't affect me, doesn't nalipyate, it doesn't have an impact on me. And the next few shlokas are all a model for Arjuna to understand how can you act, how can you create in this world without having that become your sort of, without the karma phala, so it is an example being given. This is one way in which we may wish to understand it in a calm and sort of non-troubled manner. At the same time, I would say that actually I don't know if it's relevant to us. I don't think it is.
Right, right. I think that is well taken, because not all text that is written in the ancient context will have a context today or for the 100 or 1,000 years to come. And
actually, even in the ancient context, it doesn't talk about hierarchy. There is nothing in it to apply. There is nothing in that shloka that has to be applied. If it has been applied, it has been misused. It has been misused if it has been applied, because simply he is talking about he has created four varnas divided according to guna and karma, and I am the doer and I am the non-doer. That's all. He's not saying, hey, isko upar, put this on the top of your head and put that at the bottom and be unfair to this person and worship this person. None of those things. Those are all the ways in which it has been
utilized or misutilized or abused kind of thing.
Or rather used as a justification for just injustice among people.
Absolutely. And the caste system is perhaps the way it is practiced. It has been practiced the most biggest injustice to Sanatana.
Yeah. So somebody is out there looking for what example can I find in a text which is sort of considered pious. Chalo isko, let us catch hold of this and make this our justification. Yeah. I mean, the people make practices. Practices come from people. Not to blame a text for it. I mean, really, if you need a religious text to tell you to love other human beings, your mom and dad can tell you that.
Right. Very true. Well taken in that spirit. And there is a lot more where we are running out of time. And 1 hour is not enough for Mani Rao. And Bhagavad Gita is 700 slokas. I wish we had time to go through each sloka. And the way the English is written, it is absolutely poetic. Even if you do not understand a single percentage of Sanskrit, and you are someone who can understand simple English, please read the second page, which is the translation. Each page you can just go ahead and read the English translation.
Thank you.
It runs so well. And
I might come back to you for an endorsement. Okay, this is really good. Thank you.
Yes. From KLF, you'll get an endorsement definitely. So thank you, Maniji. And this was brilliant to have you on Bhav Sambad. And as we continue to walk with you, and we would like to have other sessions as well. And this is not the end of it. This is the start of it. So
thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah. May more Bhagavad Gita sessions happen. And there are so many things remaining, because the idea of violence, idea of samadukha, idea of sadhana, a lot of things are there. And the idea of how to get knowledge, right? Sadhavan labhate jnana tatpara sahitindriya. So all those. So there are so many to learn from epistemological perspective of knowledge building in ancient India, and a lot more. An Indian knowledge system today, which the government of India is very interested to promote, Bhagavad Gita becomes one of the central texts in that area. And also, as International Yoga Day is promoted around the world, Bhagavad Gita is also very prominent text of yoga, apart from Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So thank you, Mani Rao ji. We'll keep continuing and coming back.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Nice
Thank you so much. All right.